Hello, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity. So this is another one of my weekend review videos where I just talk about, just off the top of my head, because I don't have time to do full videos on them. I just talk about some stuff that I watched this week and review it. Get it? Whatever. Anyway, so this is my third time doing this. This probably is going to become a weekly thing, at least for the foreseeable future, because there's a shitload of stuff I'm watching. I don't have time to cover it all. So anyway, in this video, I'll be talking about the latest episodes of The Mandalorian. So I'll be talking about the first two episodes of The Mandalorian, the Star Wars show on Disney Plus, and I'll also be covering the latest episodes of Rick and Morty and His Dark Materials, and the film Dr. Sleep, which is the latest Stephen King adaptation, sequel to The Shining. I wouldn't sell that movie, so I'll be talking about that too. Mostly spoiler free. I'll try, if I get into any spoilers, I'll try to give you a spoiler warning before I do so, because I might, I don't know, stream of consciousness, whatever. I might want to talk about spoilers. Who knows? Anyway, let's start with the Mandalorian. So the first two episodes of The Mandalorian dropped on Disney Plus. I think the first one was a couple days ago, and the second one was today. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I have a general feeling for the buzz around The Mandalorian, but I have a feeling that it's more positive than a lot of the more recent Star Wars stuff has been. What I'm thinking about mostly while I'm watching The Mandalorian is that it is a real shame that this is coming, that this stuff didn't come out when I was a teenager. And I often think about this because this is what me and my brother always said about Marvel movies as well. Because there's, you know how there's like shitloads of Marvel movies, they're making everything into, every comic book into a movie. And we always think, well, why couldn't they have done this like in the early 90s when we were reading comic books? They have to wait and do it a couple decades later when we don't care as much about comic books. Now, I still care about Star Wars, but I was really into Star Wars. In fact, I remember like doing a Star Wars role-playing game with my friends, and one of us would be like a bounty hunter. I don't know if we said a Mandalorian in particular, but a Boba Fett-esque. This is the first time I've ever heard the term The Mandalorian, so I'm not that deep into the extended Star Wars lore. But I remember doing a role-playing game where we were like a bounty hunter with the Boba Fett thing. And this is, why couldn't I have had a show like that back then? See, I do feel, though, that a show like that would have been more well-received, that more, not just me, but more people wanted more Star Wars stuff, because there was like a dead zone for like 11 years between the Return of the Jedi and the prequels, and of course I'm not counting any of the books or specials or any of that crap. It was basically a dead zone. I think there was like a C-3 cartoon droids or whatever, but none of that counts. So there was a dead zone where there's basically no Star Wars. No, it was more than 11 years. It was, let's see if I can do the math here. 16 years, I want to say. 16 years without any, like, and so if there were really something like this, like, everyone would have jumped on it. Everyone would be like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. But in the atmosphere we have today, it's more the opposite. It's an oversaturation, plus people have become so negative because of the culture of rebooting and, like, jumping on franchises that in general, that's like played movies and show, like everything has to be a franchise. Because it's funny, my parents, I was asking them what shows they're watching tonight, and like, oh, we're gonna watch Hawaii Five-0 and then Magnum PI. And like, what is it? Is this the 80s? Like, they're just recycling like shows. Like, it's funny that they would say that sentence in the year 2019, where it sounds like something you should say in the 80s. Hey, Colonel Doomsday, how's it going? I don't think there's going to be anyone else here to moderate, but that's all good. Glad you're here. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Star Wars. So that's why I feel like this show isn't maybe going to be as well received as it could have been, because particularly with Star Wars, it did. I'm not going to get into it. It's become very controversial. Everyone's sour about how they see any new material as just the evil Disney Corporation trying to milk more money out of it. And to be fair, there's truth to that, but there would be truth to that back in the 90s, in the early 2000s. I feel like it would have been better received then, and just because that culture of like sucking out the franchise and jumping on franchises didn't exist. But ironically, that's the only reason why we get a show like this, is because that culture of beating franchises to death exists. I think it's the same thing with Star Trek, and that's why a lot of people were sour about the idea of getting so many Star Trek shows, where I'm still stuck in the 90s, where I'm like, yes, give me shitloads of Star Trek shows. I don't care if it breaks canon. I don't even care if they suck. I'm going to watch the shit out of it. Maybe, a lot of haters would say I'm part of the problem, but so be it. I don't care. Anyway, Colonel Deuce says, I probably would have chosen the same as your folks, White Rose owns Disney. Yeah, well, White Rose, I wouldn't doubt that. White Rose probably does own Disney in the universe of Mr. Robot, because it's so fictionalized. I don't really see why time travel would be any worse. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Back to The Mandalorian. So, I enjoyed the show. Some people say it has a spaghetti western feel, and obviously it does, because that's deliberate. They're going for a spaghetti western feel. Now, I'm not a huge fan of westerns. Usually when a show is trying to be like a western, say like Firefly, I actually hold that against it and say, I wish it wouldn't really try to be a western. But in this case, I don't think it hurts the show. I like it. And it's funny because there's very little dialogue, particularly with the Mandalorian. Like in the first part of it, like he barely spoke at all. And it was just the other guys who were talking. In the second episode in particular, I think I can't remember how long. It went for maybe 20 minutes without a line of dialogue. But I didn't notice because it felt natural. And when there was natural to have dialogue, they have dialogue. And that's, again, I'm going to get back to Mr. Robot. That's why I didn't like that silent episode of Mr. Robot, because it didn't feel natural. It felt contrived, because when you're in a police station, when people should be talking, and when Don was out roaming when Elliot was in the city and when Don was investigating things, people should be talking. So it felt obvious that it was a gimmick and that they were purposely holding, and it didn't feel natural. Whereas in The Mandalorian, they could have went the entire episode without any dialogue, and I wouldn't have cared one bit. I wouldn't have saw it as a gimmick, because it felt natural. It made sense for the characters. It made sense for the situation they were in. And that's why I still disagree with everyone who loved that episode of Mr. Robot. I think it was a total gimmick and it felt unnatural. And if they had allowed one or two pieces of dialogue and had most of the episode dialogue free where it felt natural, I would love it more. I would be okay with it. But because they said, no, let's do a gimmick where the whole episode said, we'll have this line of dialogue said, no, let's not talk, and the line at the end of the episode saying, oh, it's okay to talk again. Felt very gimmicky to me. But anyway, I'm sorry. Getting back to Mr. Robot, sorry. But that's why I like The Mandalorian, because it felt completely natural, and it felt like they built the character. Now, obviously, the character of The Mandalorian was very much like whoever the fuck, I can't even, I'm never into westerns and spaghetti westerns, whoever the name of Clint Eastwood's character, who was like, what was he, the man with no name or some bullshit like that? I can't remember. But he's obviously very much modeled off of this character, from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars, all that shit. Let's see what else we have going in the chat. I do like Firefly. I could like it more if it wasn't trying too hard to be a Western. That's why I like the movie Serenity more. Because Serenity doesn't feel like it's trying to be a Western the way that Firefly does. But I still enjoy Firefly. I don't think it's the greatest thing ever like a lot of other people do. Valentine Voss says, hey Mark, did you catch the shadow on the wall and the reflection on his helmet of the boss jumping around simply on top of the canyon? No, I did not. Interesting. I did not catch that, so I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. But anyway, So I enjoyed it. I think this. I don't know if there's a lot of people who enjoy the Mandalorian more than a lot of other Star Wars things. I can see why, because this is the kind of thing they should be doing instead of doing. Oh, let's do Han Solo when he was a younger person, or let's say, oh, how exactly did the plans of the Death Star get before New Hope? How exactly did the Rebels get the plan? Like, those are things we did. Like, they too much focus on milking nostalgia from the original trilogy, whereas an idea of creating a totally new character who is set in the same universe, so there's definitely still elements of nostalgia because you have a guy who looks like Boba Fett, you have a lot of familiar aliens and faces, well, not characters, but aliens and places that pop up and you can go, oh, I remember those. But it's not too much nostalgia. It's like, to me, it's the right amount. It's exactly what you do. It has the right mixture of originality and nostalgia, whereas stuff like Solo, Rogue One relied too heavily, particularly Solo. Like, Rogue One wasn't too bad, but my biggest issue with Rogue One was the fact that they had to set it in how they get the plans of the Death Star. Like, who cares? Couldn't they come up with the original? Like, if they had like the same characters and the same sort of things happen in the movie, but they came up with a more original scenario instead of relying too much on what happened before New Hope, I would have liked it a lot better. And that's what I liked about The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian's not saying, ooh, how did Boba Fett get there? Or, ooh, what happened to this bounty hunter? No, you see a lot of familiar faces. You had that android who was like, there's in the background of Empire Strikes Back. I don't know if it's the same exact character. I'm not that big and steeped into the Star Wars lore, but if it's not, it might be. But if it's not, it's the same kind of character at the very least. And you have it set after the Empire has fallen, and you have it set in the Star Wars universe. This is exactly the kind of shit they should do more of. In fact, the other Star Wars show I heard about them teasing on Disney Plus was an Obi-Wan prequel. Don't do that. Don't do an Obi-Wan show. Learn from your mistakes with Solo. Although I will admit, I'd much rather see an Obi-Wan prequel than a Han Solo one. But still, do something original. And that's why I was so on board with the Rian Johnson original trilogy, or even a Dan and Dave like Knights of the Old Republic trilogy. But to be fair, I'm not very sad that they scrapped that, because screw Dan and Dave. I don't mind Rian Johnson as much as other people do, but I can kind of see with all the negative press he got why they would kind of walk away from him. I personally would have loved to see a Rian Johnson trilogy, but that's just me. What else have we got? The Man with No Name. Yes, that's his name. And Colonel, I'm going to say who cares to those earlier Star Wars questions. And Valentin Voss says Jon Favreau is Disney's golden. Well, that's another thing. Jon Favreau is involved in this, and that's probably you want to get good, reliable talent like that. And you notice that Taika Waititi did the voice of that android bounty hunter, which I love. I can be honest, I actually liked the first episode better than the second one. The second one seemed just a bit silly to me, about the Jawas. It just seemed a bit dumb. I would have rather just seen the Mandalorian kill the Jawas. And I thought, well, okay, I'm getting to mild spoilers for episode 2. So if you're really sensitive, you don't want to hear spoilers, just mute for a second. But anyway, I wasn't that interested in seeing, like, I would have rather Mandalorian just killed all the Jawas and got his shit back. I think the whole plot was contrived where, he has to fight this monster and get this egg, and the Jawa's like, egg, and they just rip it off and start like eating this disgusting shit. Like, I thought that was kind of dumb. And what would stop the Jawas from ripping him off and taking the egg and not giving him his shit back? Because what? Because he's going to kill them if he doesn't? Well, why doesn't he just kill them in the first place and just take his shit back? I don't know. I think the whole plot was a bit contrived. And why he's like, it's a fortress, I'm never going to get up to it. Like, he had them. If he would have just been more prepared, he was very close to killing them all. So he could have tried again and got them the second time. Don't buy this stuff. But anyway, I did like how the Baby Yoda thing froze the monster, like used the Force, and so it shows that it's Force sensitive. that was probably my favorite aspect of the episode, and I like the whole concept of the Baby Yoda thing. Like they had that reveal at the end of the first episode, but I like the first episode better. I think it was really good setup, establishing the bounty hunters as what he does, how they show him. I think that's exactly how you establish a character. You establish the world. You establish what the show's going to be about. And you establish what a badass character is. And then you had that absolutely love the scenes with the android. I was hoping we'd see more of that android that wasn't dead, but I think it is dead now, which I was under the impression he would be in the show a lot more, not just the first episode. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll come back to life because he is a droid after all. But, yeah. I mean, people were saying before I saw the episode, people were like, "Oh, it's an out-and-out comedy. How can people deal with such a over-the-top comedy?" It's not. It's like definitely comedic moments to it, but I would say less so than most Star Wars films, not more so. So I don't know what the hell those people are talking about. Anyway, let's see. Valentine Voss says they're already talking about the Mandalorian, the movie. Well, that's what I heard in the headlines, but if you dig deeper, what I heard was there are certain countries that doesn't have Disney Plus yet. And so what they're talking about doing is cutting the entire season, the first season of the Mandalorian show, into a movie and releasing it in those countries that don't have Disney Plus. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true, but if so, that's totally different than saying they're going to make a Mandalorian movie based off the TV show. They're just going to release the show but cut it into a movie. Just what I heard, may be totally wrong. Anyway, Carl Neves said, "I heard about the Obi-Wan prequel." I'm like, please leave it alone. Yes, exactly. And Colonel Doom says, Jawas always annoyed the crap out of me. I didn't mind seeing them at first, actually. I thought they were fine to begin with. Like, when he was attacking them, I thought that was pretty cool. But when they had that thing, we're like, oh, you have to make a deal with them, and they're making fun of it. Oh, you're Jawa, like, Jawanese, whatever they call it, sucks. And they make him get the egg, and like, egg. I'm like, all that's dumb. Almost as much as Ewoks. No, then I gotta disagree with you there, Colonel Doomsday. Jawas are not as bad as Ewoks. Ewoks are definitely worse, in my opinion. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on The Mandalorian. I'm really looking forward to it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it had a nice tone. It was great seeing the Star Wars universe explored. And, they every once in a while those show like a animal puppet from that we're familiar with, but it didn't like suck too much on or rely too much on nostalgia and rely too much on the original series. So I liked it. I think it's probably the best, I don't know if you call it standalone, but outside of trilogy Star Wars stuff that they released since Disney bought it, personally. Anyway, only 2 episodes in though, so who knows? It could get worse, but I do have a lot of high hopes for it. Anyway, so let me move over and talk about the next thing I want to talk about in this video, which is Rick and Morty. Now, I like this show. I watch it regularly. I'm not that, like, people are crazy. Like, the fan base of the show is insane. And I know personally knew a lot of people who talk about the show like it was the greatest thing ever, the best thing since sliced bread. And like, it's been like, I think 2 years or something like that since the last season came out, and people have been like acting like they've been deprived of oxygen. Like, oh, we're missing more Rick and Morty. And I like this show, but not that much. I don't think it's the greatest thing ever. And I got to be perfectly honest, even as far as animated modern comedies go, I prefer BoJack Horseman. That's just me. I know. So there's some people who would literally like kill me on the internet just for saying that. And that's how crazy the fan base is over the show. But I enjoy it. Sometimes it's a bit too crazy over the top, particularly season 3, when they got into like the Citadel of Ricks and the Citadel of Mortys. Like, that's over the top. That was too much for me. I just couldn't get into that. But as far as this premiere of season 4 goes, I liked it. It was a classic Rick and Morty episode to me. To me, this is an episode that could have fit into any season and perfectly belonged there, which to me I think is a really good thing, because it shows that Rick and Morty isn't losing their touch, or it's not going crazy or overboard or anything like that, that it's keeping that same feeling. And it's an original concept. Like, it's not like, oh, this is shit I've seen before and I'm sick of it. That's not what I'm saying. It's definitely an original concept, and it was a very funny episode, but it has that same feeling that Rick and Morty has, and which I think is very much a good thing. Very much a good thing, that it's staying true to itself and what makes the show so good. So let's go into the chat. And Colonel Doomsday says, I'm not seeing the Mandalorian. I was talking about the Jawas. Oh, I know you were talking about the Jawas in the New Hope. And that's what makes that statement worse, Cardinal Doomsday, because they were worse than the Mandalorian. So you're just basing off of New Hope. And I definitely think they're nowhere near as bad as Ewoks. Simba Trey says, fuck Pickle Rick, I'm all about the shrimp and the wasp Rick. Yeah, I don't know. Pickle Rick was just so fucking weird out of left field. That is just, when I saw this, it's like, what the fuck is going on? And then it became a huge thing. Everyone's going, oh, Pickle Rick! It's just so absurd, which is why people are like so obsessed with it. And to be fair, the wasp and the shrimp Rick were not as absurd as Pickle Rick. So I might have to stick with the Pickle Rick personally. Because, the wasp and the shrimp Rick is kind of things that it's very similar. To me, that again, it was par for the course. It's something I'd expect to see in Rick and Morty nowadays. Not saying it's a bad thing. It was still funny. I still love like the contrast of how nice all the wasps were while they were like killing that one dude and just like ripping and they eat all the babies, but they were being so nice to each other. Like that was pretty fucking weird. Anyway, Colonel Doomsday says Ewok movie starring... No! You're going to make me throw up. Ewok movie starring Vic Fontaine. Oh, don't even. Oh, this is going to have my nightmares now, Colonel Doomsday. Thanks a lot. By the way, if Ewoks versus Vic, Ewoks win. I'm sorry, but they do. I can't. Recently, there's a lot of YouTube channels and other things that are like saying, "Oh, I like Vic Fontaine." No, fuck Vic Fontaine. God damn it! I even get to this day I get comments on my favorite characters video where people are like, "How can you not like Vic Fontaine? Your video isn't invalid because you don't like Vic. What's wrong with you?" No, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with anyone who actually likes that motherfucker? Ugh. I will never back down from that stance, ever. And I think anyone who does is crazy. But anyway, what else have we got going in the chat? Simba Trey says, eating the man alive was so disturbing and funny at the same time. Was so weird. Only Rick and Morty can do that. Yeah, that is such a Rick and Morty thing. That is this kind of thing that they pull very well and that I've come to expect in the show. And that works very well for the show. And make it work. Yes, exactly. And Colonel Doomsday says, agrees with me. Yes, the Ewoks win. It's easy to hate Vic Fontaine. Absolutely it is. But I love the episode how Morty had that death crystal. It was constantly like turning it and being like, and the way he talked, it was all like set for trying to end up on that death where he dies with his love interest. And I love how she's just like, oh, you're so great, Morty. Let's go out into the weekend and hang out. And he touches the crystal and finds out that that's not the path he needs to go to die with her. He's like, no, and I'll see you maybe when we get together in our 30s. It just shows how fucked up it is to I think that's actually a good commentary in general of people who plan too far ahead and get too obsessed with long-term goals. But of course, it took it to an extreme the way Rick and Morty does, which is why it's so great. Anyway, All right, so I enjoyed it. I liked it. Eager to see. I'm a bit pissed off about this whole split season where they're only showing like 5 episodes this year, and we have to wait next year for the rest. That's like BoJack Horseman was okay because it did half. It did 8 episodes now, 8 episodes January. Rick and Morty is like, oh no, we're gonna do 5 episodes now, and you have to wait. I don't even know when the rest are dropping. But anyway, let me get to the next thing, which is His Dark Materials. So I don't know. I'm not crazy about this show yet. I haven't read the book. I know some people are obsessed with this show and they're like, oh, look at this, look at that, look at that. And it has yet to grab me. I will say, like, even Watchmen, which I think is only 1 or 2 episodes above of it, that's already grabbed me. I'm already fully invested in that show. And even I would say The Mandalorian, only after 2 episodes, I'm pretty much grabbed. Whereas His Dark Materials, also 2 episodes, yet to grab me. I'm still going to stick with it. I'm still curious to see where it goes, but it does look a bit... That's what I worry about adapting. I don't know how old this book is, but I'm sure it's at least 20, 30 years old. And that's probably one of the issues with it, is that it can seem a bit done and not that original, because so much movies and other future stuff were inspired by these classic novels and go further. So when you go back to the classic that inspired it all, it seems a bit not as fresh or original. There was a lot of it, particularly novels where this was the issue with, like the John Carter. If you try watching that movie, it's not very good because even though John Carter inspired like a shitload of stuff like Star Wars. So I think it might be this, but I'm not ready to say that I don't like the show or that I think it's plain or boring, because I don't. I'm still interested. I'm still interested in it, but it's yet to fully immerse me in the world and be like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens with Egyptians. At the moment, I'm like, who the hell are these Egyptians and why do I care about them? At the moment. But I'm still open-minded that maybe I will eventually, because to be fair, and I mentioned this the last time I talked about His Dark Materials, I felt the same way about Game of Thrones for like the first 5 episodes. Like, who the hell are these Starks? Why do I care about this guy who thinks he's a bastard? But by the end of the season, they did grab me, and I fully cared. So I'm really open to the same thing happening here with His Dark Materials. The thing with Mrs. Coulter, I believe her name is I knew, like, I could totally see it coming that she'd be evil. Like, that's obvious. I think it was in the trailers, but even I remember from that crappy movie where Nicole Kidman played her, it's beyond obvious. I think my brother, he did his video about this because he read the books and he talked about, I wonder if people could see it coming. And I was watching this with my mother, and she totally saw it coming. She knew nothing about the books. As soon as she saw that, like, to be fair, she didn't see it coming in the previous episode, but this episode, like before they revealed it, she's like, oh, she's looking a bit suspicious there. So she kind of tell. In fact, she guessed that she was in charge of the whole damn thing, which I didn't know. Like, I knew she was evil, but I didn't know that she basically was the Gobblers. I didn't remember that because I don't remember that crappy movie very much, and I never read the books. It was obvious she was evil, but I don't know if it was obvious. But it was obvious that she was responsible for kidnapping Lyra's friend, whatever the hell his name is, because I could tell that in the first episode just because of, I mean, they kind of made it obvious. The way Lyra was like hugging her, it's like, oh, my friend has to come with me. And she's like, yeah, sure, your friend. She gives a really evil look. And the next thing we know, he's being kidnapped. So it's impossible. Oh, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyway, Let's see. The Golden Compass came out in about 1995. Okay, so how many years is it? 95. It was so over 20 years. Not quite 30. And the next two books over the next 2 years. Did your mom like it more than you? I don't think so. I think she was a bit like on par with me. Unless she's also yet to be fully immersed, but I wanted to stick with it. And I've read the books, as you know, and I think it's too dark. What's too dark? The show is too dark? You mean figuratively speaking, or literally, like they need to put more lights in there? I think you would mean like tonally is what I think that the show is being too dark. I do wonder, though, if the books were meant to appeal to kids yet, because I'm still confused on who the target audience of the show is, or at least the books were meant to appeal more to younger audiences. Like I don't know if it was like a YA series or whatever technically, but the show, I'm very confused if it's trying to be like Game of Thrones like and appeal more to adults, or if it's trying to appeal to wider audiences, including teenagers, be like Hunger Games. I'm still very confused on where exactly the tone lies. I've yet to, as far as I remember, I've yet to see any nudity in it. So maybe it's trying to appeal to younger audiences as well. Currently, says the show figuratively. I think it's YA, but I'm not sure. Okay. Later on up here, you said 5. That's all. What are you talking about? I can't remember what the conversation was about that. The Rick and Morty, how they're only releasing 5 episodes. Oh yeah, that's true. That's right. That is a bit annoying. Anyway, so, yeah, so this episode is okay. Like, as I said, it's yet to grab me, but I'm still interested. I'm not totally invested in the thing with the Egyptians. I still don't know why I'm supposed to care, but I do care more about Lyra, and they had the reveal that Azrael is her father. I did not know that. I don't even know if they revealed that in the movie, in the crappy movie, because my brother said that this wasn't revealed until much later in the story. So that the show changed things up by revealing it. And plus, also, they had this scene where the evil dude from the Emporium, or whatever the hell they called, went to, like, basically our universe, like, went to a parallel universe. And that didn't even click with me until, like, I watched a video, maybe my brother's video or some other videos were pointed this out. I was like, oh, yeah, because when I was watching it at first, I was like, oh, so their universe actually looks a bit like ours, and they have cell phones and cars and everything. Oh, that's weird. I thought I remember it looking more like medieval-like. But then when that was explained, actually, it's because he went to a different universe, and that also explains why the guy he was meeting with thought it was weird that he had the snake with him. And I was like, oh, yeah. That explains everything. It also implies that Azrael is traveling dimensions. I'm probably totally wrong about that. I don't know. Don't tell me. Don't spoil me. I will find out. But anyway, yeah. So it was okay. Like, I'm not totally like, as I said, I'm not blown away by it yet, but I'm willing to stick with it and see. Jury's still out. I think it could go either way. It could end up being like, I'm not too much into the show. We'll see by the end of season 1. I could probably make my final judgment. Anyway, let me get into Doctor Sleep. I want to get into Doctor Sleep, movie I just saw in theaters last night. And if you don't know, it's a sequel to The Shining. It's actually based off of Stephen King novel. And so if you don't know the story of The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, of course, did the 1980 movie with Jack Nicholson, and Stephen King hated it. He thought it was one of the worst movies to adapt. I'm just seeing in the chat, Colonel Doomsday said, I would spoil you, Mark. Yeah, I know I'm spoiling you a lot with the stuff you don't watch, but I haven't read the book. So yeah, you could potentially spoil me about his Dark Materials because I haven't read the book and you have. Anyway, You also say Lyra is just an early DS9 close until she goes. A little like Jake Sisko clothes. That's what she's dressed in. Anyway. um. Anyway. Oh yeah. Back to Doctor Sleep. So it's interesting because this movie it's trying to be a sequel. It's trying to be based off of the Stephen King book, which is a sequel to his book. But it's also trying to be a sequel to the Shining movie at the same time, and also at the same time it has to like live up to all these expectations because a lot of people think that Shining is one of the greatest horror movies of all time and it's like a masterpiece and all this. So it has a lot of shit that is juggling around. And I think it actually does an amazing job at it. To be clear, I really enjoyed this movie. I don't think it's the best movie ever, but I liked it arguably more than The Shining. But before you go getting too excited over that statement, thinking, oh my God, you got to bear in mind that I didn't really like The Shining as much as a lot of people do. I didn't dislike it. I thought it was an enjoyable movie. It was adequately, scary and creepy, and I like that sort of creepy movie thing. But I'm not that crazy about this. And I talked about this when I did my top 10 horror films, and I explained why The Shining would not be on my list when surely would be on almost any top 10 horror list, except for people who would say, oh, it's not really a horror, it's a thriller. But I made it clear in my list I was mostly including thrillers. I wasn't distinguishing between horrors and thrillers. I could have called it top 10 horrors and thrillers for anyway. Yeah, and I explained that why I wasn't so crazy about The Shining. And one of the main things I said that why I didn't think it was okay, it was good, but it wasn't like the greatest thing ever, is because Jack Nicholson was like the number one candidate to go crazy. Like at the very start of the film, he's like, Danny, I told you to knock that fucking shit off, man. And it's like, he's already crazy at the start. So it's not a very effective story of someone, a family man going crazy, because he starts the whole film as crazy. And when he starts like doing that shit with the typewriter, it's like, duh, of course. It doesn't seem out of place at all because Jack Nicholson's a fucking nut job throughout the entire film. So when he starts like chasing with the axe, you're like, oh, of course he's going to do that. But and ironically, I don't know if it's ironic, but interestingly, that is also one of Stephen King's biggest complaint about the film himself. That's part of the reason why Stephen King didn't like the adaptation. Is he said the exact same thing. He did not like the casting of Jack Nicholson, particularly this. At that time he was mostly known for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where he played someone absolutely crazy, because he wanted Jack Torrance to be a relatable character, someone the audience could root for. And so when he goes crazy, it seems out of left field, and it shows how insidious this haunted hotel is, that it could drive a good man to try to kill his family. Whereas in Stu Kubrick's version, well, of course, it's like, of course he's going to chase his family with an axe. Like, you can see that in the first scene. So I actually totally agree with Stephen King in that case. But I had never read the book, so the other things that he didn't like, I didn't really care about. But the other thing is, I'm not really crazy about Stanley Kubrick the way other people. Like, a lot of people will think he's the master, and every film he made is a masterpiece. It's just not my thing. It's just not my style. I understand that he is a visionary director and he helped inspire a lot of things I enjoyed, and that he is a technically good director. But I just don't care too much for his style of filmmaking, I'm sorry to say. I know hipsters will kill me over this. They 2001 Space Odyssey was an absolute masterpiece. Kind of boring, I gotta say. I'm sorry. But so much in the same way that I preferred the sequel, the criminally underrated sequel, 2010, the year we made contact, is in the same way I prefer Dr. Sleep, because people didn't like 2010. And most people in modern times don't even know exists. Came out in like 84, I want to say. somewhere in the mid 80s. I loved it. It had more of a Steven Spielberg-esque feel to it, like this fantastical sci-fi, which is why people didn't like it, because they wanted a Stanley Kubrick sequel. But the movie 2010 was more true to the novel than it was to Kubrick's film, and that's why I liked it, because I actually read the novel and I prefer the novel to the film. The film, I think, is a bit, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get killed, but I'm just gonna say it. People make your death threats now, but pretentious. I'm sorry, but it was. And if you don't think it was, then whatever. You're just in denial. But anyway, I feel the same way about Dr. Sleep. The Dr. Sleep feels more like a Stephen King movie than a Stanley Kubrick movie. Although you could tell they were doing lots of shout outs to Stanley Kubrick's version, and they were trying to satisfy fans of that film as well. They were doing a lot of callback, a lot of visual callbacks, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay. I think that's fine. Some people actually had a huge issue with that and like, oh, this movie's pandering too much. But I was like, no, you kind of have to. You're in that situation. I see Jesse Otter in the chat saying, "Here's Johnny." Anyway, like, of course they, have to call back to that. Yeah, no, I'm not a huge fan of horror, as Colonel Doomsday knows. But anyway, so I didn't mind that they did callbacks to Stanley Kubrick's version, and how apparently, because in the film, it's not really spoilers saying this because it's in the trailer, but in the film, they go to the Overlook Hotel towards the end of the film, and that was not in the book, because in the book, The Shining, the Overlook Hotel burned down at the end of the book, so of course it's not going to be around for the sequel, but in the movie it didn't, so it's still around, so they go back there, which I'm fine with. And I was reminded of, when I was watching this movie, I was reminded of another Stephen King adaptation. Thinner, which I've heard, like, people, I think Nostalgia Critic and other people trash it as like over the top, cheesy, and dumb. I actually kind of liked it. I remember liking it when I first saw it, and I think this movie is better, to be clear, but it's definitely much better made, better acting, better cinematography, better music, all that. But it did have that same similar feeling, something I like, because it's not just a stereotypical horror where there's a monster chasing people and you have a group of people and they all die and there's only one person who survives. I hate that trope. That's mainly why I'm not a fan of horror movies, because I'm just sick of all the tropes that most of them follow. Where this one, I mean, you could arguably say that there is only one. Oh, sorry. Spoilers. I don't let it slip. But you could arguably say it's kind of like that. That is mild spoilers for the film, but not really. I actually, because I didn't even link that it would be like that, because they go about it in such a different way. And that's why, yeah, so, but what makes it different and why I thought of The Thinner is because it's not just like a group of murderers or monster chasing people. It is, but they actually fight back. So in some ways it becomes more of an action movie than just a straight up like horror thriller, which I enjoyed. That's why I prefer it to The Shining, because The Shining, as much as I liked it, it is, I want to say, one note. I'm sorry to say most of Stanley Kubrick's films are. Again, that's your style, that's your thing, good. I'm not saying it's objectively bad or anything like that. I'm just saying I'm personally not into that because he does it well. I definitely won't put that down. But yeah, too artsy. Yeah, I want to say I gotta. Anyway, in the chat, Colonel Doomsday saying, I've only seen the first Shining movie once. That was enough. Yeah. I don't think it's one of the best movies ever. Some people will say it was one of the best movies, or at least best horror thriller movies ever. I'm sorry, I just don't agree. And Colonel Doomsday says, I like some Kubrick films and not all. My favorite Kubrick film was actually Full Metal Jacket. It's weird. That's the one of his I like the most personally. And Colonel Doomsday says, I got to rewatch 2010. Oh, you do? I used to watch that. I've seen that like maybe 20, 30 times. I love that movie. That's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't even care for 2001. Go figure. Anyway, Yeah, 1984, Colonel Doomsday says. So anyway, for 2010. 2010 came out in 84. Confusing the hell out of you. Who's on third? Anyway, so Doctor Sleep. Yeah, so it was really, they had that guy who played the henchman to the main villain. And the whole movie, I was like, who's this guy? He looks so familiar. I know who he is. It turned out, like, after I saw the movie, I looked it up, and it was the Native American dude whose name I'm blanking on from season 2 of Westworld, who had his own episode that everyone loved. You know the guy I'm talking about. Like, he was in this film. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, I didn't recognize him because he's playing a completely different kind of character in this film. Coming to this as horror movies have changed a lot over the decades, too. This is true. And irony lives, Mark. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Anyway, so this Doctor Sleep is pretty much nothing like The Shining, at least tonally. Like, it definitely has a lot of the same themes. It definitely carries the same characters. It does a lot of callbacks, but tonally wise, it is more like a Stephen King novel, and I can see why that would turn off some fans of The Shining who think that this just not okay with this a sequel going in a totally different direction. Of course, since I'm not such a big fan of The Shining, I loved it and I actually prefer it. I think the acting and this is a movie, one of those movies, you know, some movies you watch in a few days, you can't stop thinking about it, the plot or the dialogue or something. For me, this is one of those movies where I can't, like, even days after I've seen it, I can't stop thinking about the cinematography, like, and the editing and the craft. Like, this is probably one of the most beautiful shot, like, edited, like, the way it's, like, flows together, the effects, like, that does account for a lot. And it was extremely, that's why I would say this film was much better than The Thinner, that even though it plot-wise, it kind of reminded me of that. But this is much better crafted. Like, the acting, the cinematography, the music, everything, it was just absolutely amazing. I'm not getting into spoilers about the ending. I will say I didn't really care for the ending as much. I didn't think it was a bad ending. I thought it was fine, but it didn't, like, totally blow me away. So I didn't give rating. I don't know if I ever give ratings for stuff in these videos, but I'm going to give a rating for Dr. Sleep. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I don't think it was one of the best movies ever, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a good movie. I think it's worth watching. I think it was effectively creepy and scary. Did fall into a couple of the horror tropes, but for the most part, like, I love how it was more, at times it was almost like an action film. I love how, like, they were fighting back, and it was more portraying a battle between two sides rather than just someone losing his mind, who, of course, you know he's going to lose his mind because duh. Zon McLaren. Yes, Colonel Doomsday. That's the guy I'm thinking of. Anyway, yes, you know how to use Google very well. Anyway, so that's it. That's all I got to say. I was going to get into some Dr. Sleep spoilers, but I think this video has went on long enough, and I don't think anyone watching it has probably seen it anyway, so whatever. So that's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have watched this, and be sure to check out my channel. I'll try, as I said, I'll try to do these once a week to talk about all the shit that I'm watching. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.